Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, two of the Gulf of Mexico's most important cities have long had a barrier between them. That might change soon for New Orleans and Havana, as announcements were made to rebuild diplomatic relationships between their two countries. We'll look at the impact. We'll also look at two universities going in different directions financially, an increase in college student suicides, and our Future Watch segment previews new developments slated for the new year. And in the wake of several incidents nationwide, we'll look at procedures for police dealing with potentially deadly situations. On the beat for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Richard Thompson, reporter for the New Orleans Advocate. First, over to Mike, and about police procedure in dealing with potentially deadly situations. And we've seen nationwide incidents of unarmed black men, young black men being killed, even a child. What's going on with our own police department in terms of training to try to forestall such an event?
Well, first of all, with the NOPD, there, as we all know, there had been a history of misuse of force, police brutality, and a lot of that was thrust into the national spotlight during Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath, the Danziger Bridge and the Glover case. So that was known rather acutely here before Michael Brown shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri, before Eric Garner died in a chokehold in Staten Island. And a lot of that was accelerated because of the consent decree that now hangs over the NOPD. And in some ways, while New Orleans might have had a longer road to travel, we're a little further along simply because we were forced to by the federal government and its oversight. And I will say that, you know, some of the things that have been implemented since Mayor Landrieu took office under the previous police chief, Ronald Surpass, he implemented some things which we're now hearing in the national conversation, such as body cameras, which will record from the officer's perspective, you know, everything that happens during a confrontation with citizens. As we know, Ronald Surpass came up with the you lie, you die policy, meaning that an officer caught giving a false statement could be fired. And that was meant to break the so-called, you know, blue line, which officers don't rat out other officers. They may see brutality or wrongdoing, but the culture for decades was that even otherwise law-abiding cops would not go in and point the finger at bad cops, and that was part
protecting your own at all costs.
Exactly, and you know that was probably a more difficult nut to crack. That's a big cultural change within a large organization, and an officer to this day who crosses that blue line can be a pariah within the department. And these are, you know, people who you rely on perhaps to save your life in a tough situation, and it's just very difficult to go against the grain. But that was just one of the policies implemented. Now, there are other policies, you know, actually mandated by the consent decree when it comes to, you know, the training of officers. One of the things as part of that training, and it's now once again part of the national conversation, is for officers, first of all, the long-standing rule is to only use enough force to neutralize a threat. And that threat, in order to use lethal force, has to be that the officer is threatened with some form of great bodily harm. But at a certain point, and maybe that was, you know, one of the things in the Michael Brown case in Ferguson, if you can, you know, under close sort of hand-to-hand combat, there's far more of a threat than an armed officer some distance away outside of close quarters. At that point, there should really be, you know, it's a mismatch. There is no threat. Officer's armed, you know, suspect is unarmed.
I mean, officers out there in potentially very dangerous situations too. I mean, it's a very difficult situation for a police officer to be in. body cameras are looked upon as really trying to help this whole, alleviate this whole situation, to find out what actually is going on. Where do we stand now with the body cameras in the NOPD?
Well, unfortunately, and now this has gotten folded into the consent decree, while there have been promises made and the actual body cameras received by the department, they are not getting widely used. In some cases, officers are wearing them but not turning them on.
Why?
Simply because it has not caught on. There has been no, oversight, number one, and up until very, very recently, no penalty. So now, under the new chief, Michael Harrison, he is made as part of an incident report. Whenever there's a citizen-officer confrontation, there's now a checkbox where an officer has to note whether the camera was worn, the camera was used, and if those boxes aren't checked, there's a public integrity internal investigation into why not.
Okay, we have to wrap this up, but do all officers have body cameras now?
No.
Okay. We'll be talking more about
there's
this
a ways to go on that.
in the next year, I'm sure. Thanks a lot, Mike. Richard, over to you. Tulane University has started a program, a pretty intense program now, to try to help students overcome anxiety and depression, particularly in the light of some real tragic circumstances that have happened at the university this semester. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, the entire Tulane community has really been reeling this semester. And in just a few months, they've seen 5 students who have died. 2 of them, starting at the end of August, one had died, who had suffered from epilepsy, died of natural causes, and another in November had fallen off a second-floor balcony in the early morning hours. But 3 of those were students who took their own lives. One was a graduate student and 2 were undergraduate students. And so it's really kind of sparked a dialogue on campus in the last month or so, where they're trying to kind of raise awareness of mental health issues and kind of get students talking about it in order to, what they say is kind of destigmatize some of these issues that are out there. And calling around about it, one professor had kind of compared it to, if you have asthma and you need your inhaler, you can just say that. But a lot of students may be just don't feel comfortable kind of talking about it, saying they're feeling depressed and trying to seek help for that. If you look at the numbers, depression suicide is the 3rd leading cause among college-age students. So it's certainly something they want to try to tackle head on.
So the emphasis now is on preventive measures.
Exactly. And in the last few weeks, they've had a number of kind of events on campus to kind of raise awareness about it. They've started doing a few webinar series. They had a candlelight vigil in the quad. And so they're kind of trying to start to get people talking about it and kind of noticing it, get each other checking on other people, kind of noticing what some of the signs are and other ways to kind of cope and deal with stress, particularly among, a lot of students who are away from home for the first time and kind of adjusting to a lot all at once.
Is there on-campus counseling for kids?
There is, and I think that's also part of it too, is to try to let students know what kind of help is available on campus.
Go ahead.
Rather than rely on students going to counselors, isn't there a lot of emphasis on other students maybe recognizing signs, in their classmates that there might be trouble?
That's a big part of it too, with this push to try to tell people what they should, what they can look for and different ways to kind of cope and try to adjust to it. As they're starting to think about it themselves, they're able to look around at their friends, their roommates, or their classmates and kind of say, do you need a hand? How are things going? So
this just started this semester. Obviously, they're going to be carrying it into next semester. Have they seen maybe an increase in people seeking assistance?
Well, they say that so far this semester they've seen a 40% increase in students who have seen the counseling services. And some of that may be due to kind of this dialogue opening up, and some of it may just be with students that are needing help coping with what's really been a tragic semester over there.
Very tragic. Thanks a lot, Richard. Cuba. Normalizing relations with Cuba, the president announced this week. What do we expect? How is that going to impact us here in New Orleans?
Okay. Well, in a big way, but first I want to show that a viewer in Mobile actually sent a slide. On Poydras, there's a plaque, and the plaque shows the Cuban flag, which flew for the first time ever in New Orleans. There was the liberation movement outside of New Orleans. And so this, if you walk down Poydras, you can actually see this, that the Cuban flag was first flown on Poydras Street in New Orleans before it made its way to Havana. I remember in 1989 when communism and the Soviet Union started to dissolve, a man who operated a radio station, an Hispanic radio station in New Orleans, was so excited, and he predicted within a year Castro would be gone. And it seemed obvious. I mean, if the Soviet Union has dissolved, I mean, certainly little Cuba would, and of course it never happened. And here there's more pressure that you wouldn't have had in the Soviet bloc. But there's this book that was written a few years ago, and to me it's one of the Bibles of New Orleans. It's called The World That Made New Orleans, and it's about the influence between New Orleans and the Caribbean and the Gulf. And one point he makes, which we emphasize in our introduction, is that you think of Cuba and you think of Havana as being the Caribbean. It's really a Gulf of Mexico city. I mean, you look at the map, it's on the Gulf of Mexico. And so there was a line, there was a real connection between New Orleans and Havana. And this author wrote that, his name is Ned Sublette. He said that in 1962, the U.S. embargo of Cuba was also in effect an embargo on New Orleans, taking away a chunk of what had long been the town's core business and damaging the economy of New Orleans and the rest of the Gulf itself. So the two cities that were hurt the most by the embargo were Havana and New Orleans. And so once the changes come, if they come fully, it means great economic opportunities for New Orleans. There's already been some trade, going back to a mission that Kathleen Blanco, and you know, they've been sending chickens from New Orleans to Cuba, and I think there's rice that's been going back and forth. But people are already talking about the tourism possibilities. Even if tourism would start today, if the cruise ships would start today, I don't know if Cuba has the infrastructure, certainly that Americans are used to, but it's a beginning. At the same time, we always have to mention that we know that there are people that have some bitter feelings about Cuba, whose family and their family legacies, who lost a lot. And so there's a very sticky and very serious political and social issue, too. So that, you take that issue on the side, and you can't forget about it. But there's also the economic issue. And the economic issue is one that shows really great opportunities for New Orleans, both in terms of cargo, but in the cruise ship industry, and just bringing back the relationship between New Orleans and Havana. I mean, people who study, as this guy did, who study music and culture, show all kind of links between the music of the Caribbean and the Gulf Coast and New Orleans and jazz influences. I mean, there was a real line there that's just been broken since 1962.
Were there flights between New Orleans and Cuba back then, direct flights?
Not that I'm aware of, because I don't think there was too much. I think at that time Miami was starting to develop, and New Orleans was positioning itself as the gateway to Central America. But I think it's obviously it can happen now.
But regarding the embargo, that's going to take congressional action to lift that embargo.
Yeah, this is the first step in that we're normalizing relationships. We'll open an embassy, and we'll start things talking. And the reaction seems, I mean, the way I see it, I mean, I know there are people that are opposed to it, but it seems like overall there's real excitement about this happening.
And regarding tourism, and you mentioned cruise ships, that kind of tourism is not going to be opened up at this point, right?
Right. And but it will. If I was Grand Cayman, I'd be worried. Okay, if I was, if I was those places where the cruise ships have been going, because all of a sudden, once Havana becomes the destination, then I think some of the small islands will be left out. But the advantage a cruise ship can have, at least in the early days, is that you don't have to worry about hotel rooms with cruise ships. You can bring a few thousand people in, and you don't have to worry about that. So I can imagine, even from Miami, which is so close, the cruise ship could arrive in the morning and leave in the evening and spend the day there. So I think cruise ships will allow the tourism to build up. And by the way, a lot of people's image of tourism in Cuba is from The Godfather Part 2, okay, when Michael Corleone went and all the gambling. Right. But the world's changed since then.
It's changed a lot.
The mafia's not what it used to be. Gambling's not what it used to be. And the cruise ships themselves have gambling in them. And so the Cubans have a position to kind of like redefine and rebuild their tourism too.
Well, we should say not everybody agrees with this, but also that Pope Francis was in there brokering this deal over the past several months, apparently.
Right, and he thought that the human rights issue is just a human decency sort of thing to do.
All right, over to Don and Future Watch. Thanks, Errol. projects and what we're going to be looking for.
Well, as we shift within the next couple of weeks to 2015, the time clock gets a lot faster on that countdown to the 300th birthday of Louisiana. So the big celebration that's going to come, of New Orleans. And a lot of projects are going to see an uptick. The redevelopment of the World Trade Center, we saw just within the last week, the new bids come in. Maybe sometime in 2015 we'll finally see a deal where that building will get developed, and the goal all along has been to have it redeveloped by 2018. Nobody's telling right now whether that will actually happen. Another big project we'll see work on is the new hospitals as they really get ready to come online in 2015 and start moving furniture in and start employing people. We talked last week about the streetcar expansion. There will be dirt starting to turn on North Rampart Street as you head out towards St. Bernard Parish. That project will start kicking off in 2015, as will the expansion of the airport, the new terminal at the airport. You know, we've laughed on this show a lot about the cranes in the sky comment, but the cranes in the sky are continuing, and my kids have gotten to the point where they now complain about all the construction everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's going to continue. Last week, the reports came into the Causeway Commission from the researchers in Texas. Changes to the causeway could be on the horizon as well as those reports get finalized. Another big one that we will talk about next week as well is South Market District, a whole transformation of downtown New Orleans. An area that was vacant lots will literally be shops and apartments, mixed use, residential and commercial, right by the Superdome. Areas truly changing. Another project that's getting a lot of work and will get ready to roll online by 2017, the permanent pumps from the Army Corps of Engineers. We've had the stopgap ones that have done a great job and have not, fortunately, knock on wood, been tested horribly yet, but the permanent pumps are going to be finished within the next 2 years. The light repairs, we're not so much in the dark anymore. St. Charles Avenue is lit again. New Orleans East on the I-10 near the 610 or near the 510 is lit again. So the project after project after project, you'll see a lot of them really kind of come together in this next new year, especially those hospitals, and hopefully there will be a more clear path for the World Trade Center redevelopment and the Convention Center upriver. That final lot, that final plan, should have something working on it within 2015.
That's quite a list of projects.
It's never ending.
Yeah, as we approach, and of course we'll be in the 10th anniversary of Katrina next year.
Right.
And certainly the hospitals, that's really just major, and they do plan to open both VA
They
and
both will not open in 2015,
University.
and I didn't write it on my notes, and I'm going to mess up which one is. I believe it's the VA that is opening in 2015 and LSU in 2016. Okay. I might have flip-flopped that in my brain. And there's continued progress and projects also on the drainage issue. Napoleon Avenue, Louisiana Avenue. Just bear with it, folks.
It's seemingly never-ending
the
projects
the tunnels that can fit a bus
year.
in them that are going in under so many of our major roadways. The work is continuing, but it will wrap.
And hey, just to add to that list, how about the Lafitte Greenway?
Oh, yeah.
Which is
Yes.
a lower cost but pretty high visibility project.
Yeah. A walkable city,
No
creating a
longer
walkable city more and more. Okay, thanks a lot, Don. Okay, Richard, we have a university that's setting out to raise $1 billion to add to its already billion-plus endowment, and we have another university that had to cut back 7 programs. You did pieces on both. Tell us who's who.
Well, the university that's getting ready to undertake the $1 billion fundraising campaign is Tulane. And so Tulane President Michael Fitz had said this week that they're in the quiet stages of planning this campaign. And so what they're trying to do now is to try to meet with donors and those who have given to the university in the past to try to put some money aside into this so that once they're ready to go public with it in the next few years, they can say they've already got this much contributed to it, you know, how about you get on board too? Mm-hmm. And so far this year they've raised, I think, about $126 million. And that will, some of that has gone toward the stadium renovations and some of it has gone all over. And so they've already gotten real head start on it just this year alone, starting from before he had taken the helm in July. And then the university at the other end of that is, of course, UNO. And so earlier this year, a working group at UNO has started studying all of its degree programs to kind of get a sense about how many students are enrolling in which programs, what the future of each one is, how many students are actually enrolling and then going as far as to complete it. And so from that, different recommendations were made, and UNO President Peter Foss last week released his recommendations, which included eliminating 7 degree programs, closing 1 department, and cutting 26 faculty and staff from the university. And that should save about $1 million, and then in the first year, and then about $2.8 million in the second year. But there's still more changes that are going to be coming. He's expecting, I think, another 5 degree programs to be closed, another 5 to be merged, and maybe about 15 other positions to be eliminated in the coming years. And all told, that should generate maybe close to $5 million in savings.
Well, I know the university needs to save money, but it's just heartbreaking to UNO alums. I'm one of them. I know, Errol, you agree with that too.
Sure,
and
yeah.
certainly to other members.
Well, it also shows the power of alumni associations. Tulane's a much older university, so it has a much better established alumni. Plus, it's a fairly affluent alumni. UNO is relatively young. It started in 1959, and it doesn't have that same type of wow-up from the alumni. There's a lot of people who care about it and want to do something, but Tulane just got such a head start, and kind of also the national prestige that the name has, too.
Right. And what does Tulane want to do with the money that it intends to raise over the next decade?
Well, they haven't totally cemented all their plans for it. One thing that they've talked about is wanting to bring more students on campus, and so that would mean opening another residential, or another dormitory somewhere, probably another dining hall. And they'd also like to try to continue to strengthen, one thing that they're trying to do is to integrate different programs on campus to try to give students as much experience in different things as possible, and I think part of that could go toward that goal as well.
All right, thanks a lot, Richard. Mike, over to you. And this week we heard about still a backlog of rape kits over at the NOPD. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise, simply because the one area that the police department made an effort in the midst of the problems with the sex crimes unit was Captain Noel, Paul Noel, under Chief Surpass, when rape cases were languishing, he came in and he got rid of an 800 backlog of rape kits, and those are the products of the medical examinations of women who make rape complaints, and those are sent to the state police lab, and through a database of DNA, often those kits, reveal results naming a suspect. Well, now in light of this new effort, now with the rape kit backlog handled, the OIG report a month ago revealed that an even bigger problem, which was the detectives not following up and aggressively pursuing rape complaints. Even when there maybe was results from a rape kit. Well, now with all of that exposed, Noel has been put back sort of in charge of a task force to get a handle, reinvestigate several hundred cases. But at a city council hearing on the subject, he revealed that there are now 400 rape kits behind. So the problems just continue to mount despite best efforts, despite pressure from the mayor and city council. They have a real uphill battle.
Well, Noel, his first name is Paul. Is that his name? Paul Noel?
Right.
When he was in that unit before and was really able to take care of that big backlog, what happened then? Was he transferred or something, or did he stay with it?
He was. He became the commander of the 2nd District, and now from there he's back to finish the job I guess he started. But this one is maybe a little taller order, because it's not just sort of a technical issue of making sure rape kits get sent to Baton Rouge. Now it's sort of changing the culture of the detectives, making sure that they don't just dismiss difficult cases. Rape cases can often be very tough to make an arrest, much less a prosecution. Sometimes there's a he said, she said. There may be elements that make a case murky, such as drinking alcohol, foggy memories, lack of witnesses. But a good detective, tackles those and develops a case, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort.
And that's what the IG's report found, was that work was not put into
exactly.
it. And also, I know yesterday at Council, Councilwoman LaToya Cantrell was really quite upset that supervisors from that sex crimes unit who were named in the IG report are still supervising, but just in a different area, police department.
There's a public integrity investigation against the 5 detectives who were under the microscope in the IG report, have now been reassigned to desk duty. So the question remains, well, what about the commanders who were supervising those 5 officers? The police department says that the investigation is not nearly complete, that those commanders could be held accountable depending on the findings of their internal investigation.
As it continues.
Right.
Okay, we'll be hearing more. Thanks a lot, Mike. All right, folks, time for Looking Ahead. Errol.
Well, just as on 12th night we have signs to begin the Mardi Gras season, a new sign of a new season in New Orleans is when Al Scaramuza boils his crawfish. So the last couple of years he's done this, and he did this past Wednesday. So the former seafood giant boiled his first batch of crawfish to signify the beginning of the crawfish season, which usually stretches between mid-December and like early June. Reaches its peak around Jazz Fest time around April. But what I'm trying to say is that it's crawfish season.
Crawfish City is so pretty, right? Yeah. Mike?
Well, there's a lot of focus on the police consent decree, but another one to keep an eye on is that sheriff's office jail consent decree. We've seen the czar of the jail, imported from Florida, leaving the job, going back to Florida. The opening of the new jail, once again falling even further behind schedule, and the federal judge in the case, Lance Afric, starting to lose patience with the pace of progress under that consent decree. Look for some fireworks down the road.
All right, Mike, thanks. Dawn?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Saints are going to reverse their home losing streak and give us a win and false hope for the playoffs.
False hope. How you doing? Thanks, Richard.
Well, I think one thing to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks will be that we should start to hear more public discussion on the proposed smoking ban in the city's bars and also at the casino. I think that was proposed not too long ago. Some French Quarter business owners, bar owners down there are really adamantly against it. And so we should start to hear a little bit more about how that might clear up.
All right, thanks a lot. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you all for joining us. I hope everyone has a very happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas, and same to everybody at this table. Have a good evening.